Emma, a teenage girl with a calm demeanor and a hidden family history. She's been raised away from violence by her father, Marcus, who is now a quiet businessman. Briefly hint at Marcus's past as the feared leader of a powerful gang, a history he's left behind to live a peaceful life and protect his daughter from that world. One evening, as Emma made her way home from a friend's house, the streets were unusually quiet. She walked with her usual confidence, unaware of the three figures lurking in the alleyway she passed. The group of gangsters spotted her and exchanged glances, their leader smirking as they stepped out to block her path. "Hey there, pretty girl," one of them sneered, eyeing her with unsettling intent. Emma tried to walk around them, her heart racing, but they closed in, laughing as if her fear was amusing. "Leave me alone," she said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady. But her resistance seemed to entertain them more, and one of them reached out to grab her arm. Instinctively, she pulled back, but it only seemed to provoke them. "Who do you think you are, talking to us like that?" the leader taunted, tightening his grip on her arm. Emma struggled, but they shoved her roughly, laughing as she stumbled. A slap across her face left her reeling, and they let her go with one final shove, sending her to the ground. Laughing, they disappeared back into the shadows. Emma's heart pounded as she stumbled home, clutching her bruised arm and wiping blood from her lip. When Marcus saw her, his face fell, and he immediately came to her side. She hesitated, not wanting to worry him, but as his concerned gaze softened her resolve, she confided in him, describing what had happened through shaky words and tears. As Emma finished recounting the attack, Marcus's face shifted from concern to a hardened, steely expression Emma had never seen before. A fierce, buried part of him awoke, and his calm exterior faded into something far more dangerous. The image of his injured daughter filled him with a rage he hadn't felt in years. The quiet life he'd embraced all these years suddenly felt like a thin veneer over the man he used to be. Without a word, Marcus went to his study, pulling out an old, weathered phone. He dialed a few numbers he hadn't called in a long time. Within hours, he was surrounded by a handful of trusted allies, men who once worked under him and had remained loyal even after he stepped away from that world. They listened in silence as he described the gang, and without hesitation, they agreed to help him track down the men who had dared to harm his daughter. With his allies at his side, Marcus began a quiet but relentless hunt. The city's underground hadn't felt his presence in years, but he moved through it now like a phantom, reclaiming old connections and stirring up whispers wherever he went. From smoky bars to backroom poker games, he pressed for information, slipping a heavy hand over shoulders and exchanging quiet words with those who remembered his reputation. It didn't take long for the message to spread. The king was back. Marcus's former associates offered details, small leads on the gang that had attacked Emma, each one inching him closer to his targets. In dark alleys and abandoned warehouses, people spoke of his return with wary respect, watching from a distance as he moved methodically, his cold resolve a reminder of the man he used to be. Meanwhile, the gangsters went about their business, laughing and bragging over their petty crimes, completely unaware of the danger they had ignited. They had no idea that a man with more power and ruthlessness than they could fathom was drawing closer every day, piecing together the details of who they were. The storm was brewing, and they were blissfully ignorant of the wrath that awaited them. Marcus arranged a meeting with the gang leader in a secluded, dimly lit office, far from prying eyes. The leader, a cocky man named Victor, leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as Marcus entered. There was no fear in Victor's gaze, only amusement. Marcus stood tall, his voice low but lethal. "You and your men hurt my daughter. I'm giving you one chance to walk away. Leave her and her life alone, or I will make sure you regret it." Victor laughed, dismissing Marcus's warning. "You think you're still someone? You're a shadow of your past, old man." That mockery was the spark that ignited Marcus's fury. Without warning, his calm demeanor shattered. He moved swiftly, disarming Victor's men with precise force, using his knowledge of their operations to outmaneuver them. Within moments, the room was silent, and Victor was left with no choice but to listen as Marcus laid out the destruction he would bring to the gang, starting with his most trusted allies. One by one, Marcus would tear apart the foundation Victor had built. Marcus's assault on the gang began with meticulous precision, hitting them where it hurt most: their resources. First, he went after their revenue streams, shutting down operations with the help of his old network and strategically placed allies. Drug shipments mysteriously disappeared, cash flow dwindled, and their safe houses were raided by those who held unwavering loyalty to Marcus. Each hit was swift, calculated, and devastating. The gang members watched, confused and terrified, as everything they relied on started crumbling around them. Victor, once smug and confident, began to realize the scale of the threat he had unwittingly unleashed. The whispers he'd heard of Marcus's past suddenly took on a frightening new weight. Rumors spread through the gang like wildfire. Marcus was the man who had once commanded absolute loyalty, a man with skills that left his enemies either crushed or indebted. His name was now spoken in hushed, fearful tones, and many of Victor's men began to see staying with the gang as a risk they couldn't afford. In the following days, Victor's loyal crew began to shrink. The small-time dealers disappeared. Runners abandoned their posts, and even some of his trusted lieutenants began to distance themselves. Panic spread as Marcus struck at unexpected hours, with no predictable pattern. The gang felt hunted, as though a shadow was waiting for them around every corner. Marcus knew how to leave his mark without showing his face, his presence felt without being seen, a method he'd perfected in his former life. Victor, desperate to hold his gang together, called for an emergency meeting. The remaining members, haggard and shaken, gathered in an abandoned warehouse, looking to him for reassurance. He tried to calm them, promising that this washed-up old man would tire himself out. But Marcus anticipated the meeting. As Victor's voice echoed through the cold, empty space, the lights suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. In the silence that followed, Marcus's voice pierced the dark. "You thought you could harm my daughter and walk away unscathed?" His voice, cold and menacing, filled the room, sending chills through every man present. They knew they were outmatched. Panic ensued. Men scrambled to find the exits, only to find them barred by Marcus's allies, towering figures who had slipped into place unnoticed. Each exit was guarded, and there was nowhere to run. Marcus emerged from the shadows, his face a mask of cold fury, his presence commanding an instant, deadly silence. "Your leader has led you to this," he announced, his voice unwavering. "You followed him blindly, and now you pay the price." He locked eyes with Victor, who stood frozen, his bravado shattered as the consequences of his actions fully hit him. Marcus's message was clear. No one harms his family and escapes his wrath. One by one, the remaining gang members broke, pleading for mercy, some even kneeling to beg for forgiveness. Marcus let them leave, but only after warning that if they ever crossed his path or his daughter's again, they wouldn't get a second chance. As the terrified remnants of Victor's gang scattered, Marcus let Victor stand alone, stripped of his power, abandoned by his men. It was a punishment worse than any physical harm, to watch everything he'd built destroyed by a man he had underestimated. Marcus left him there, a broken reminder of the consequences of reckless cruelty, ensuring that word would spread. Marcus wasn't a man to cross. By the end of the week, the gang had dissolved completely. Victor's reputation was in ruins, and Marcus's name once again held weight in the city's underground. A quiet but undeniable warning that some people, and their loved ones, were untouchable. The air was thick with tension as Marcus faced Victor in an abandoned building on the city's edge, surrounded by the few remaining gang members who hadn't already fled. The once smug gang leader now looked haggard and desperate, his confidence completely stripped away, reduced to a man clinging to the last shreds of his former power. The men who stood around him wore faces marked by fear and uncertainty, unsure whether to flee or stay, knowing that Marcus's wrath was something they could not escape. Marcus stepped forward, his movements calm, deliberate, yet brimming with a controlled fury that made even the toughest men flinch. He looked directly at Victor, whose bravado had long faded, leaving only a shell of the man who had dared to harm his daughter. Marcus's voice echoed through the hollowed space, carrying an authority and strength that silenced any whisper or murmur among the men. "You thought you could hurt my daughter and there would be no consequences?" he began, his voice steady but laden with anger. Family is sacred. You don't touch someone's family without expecting a price. This is a lesson you've chosen to learn the hard way. Victor shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting around, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Marcus took a step closer, and the men around Victor instinctively stepped back, fearful of being too close to the storm they had brought upon themselves. Look around you, Victor. The men you thought were loyal, they're gone. The empire you tried to build, it's dust now. All because of a single foolish decision, a single act of disrespect. I warned you to stay away, and you spat in my face. Now, you have nothing left. Victor swallowed, his voice barely a whisper as he tried to salvage his pride. You think you're some kind of hero, Marcus? You're just a thug like the rest of us. Marcus's eyes flashed. A thug who understands loyalty and respect. A thug who knows that family comes first. I left this life so my daughter wouldn't know this darkness. But I came back because you forced me to. And if you ever come near her, or anyone I care about, you'll see just how much worse it can get. He leaned in close, his voice a cold, deadly whisper. Leave this city. Disappear. Because if I ever see you again, there will be no mercy. Victor, finally realizing the full gravity of his situation, gave a small, fearful nod. With nothing left but shame and fear, he turned and left, disappearing into the night. Marcus watched him go, his stance unwavering, ensuring that his message was etched in every remaining witness's mind. Family was off limits, and crossing that line would bring consequences no one would forget. In the weeks that followed, the remnants of Victor's gang scattered, leaving the city in a fractured, chaotic retreat. Those who remained were too fearful to ever speak Marcus's name, let alone seek revenge. The streets grew quiet, as if the city itself understood that the storm had passed. Marcus had reclaimed his family's peace, ensuring Emma would be safe from anyone daring enough to threaten her again. At home, the tension finally eased, but Emma noticed a change in her father's demeanor, a deeper quiet in his eyes, a resolve that hadn't been there before. She approached him one evening, curious yet cautious, asking about the rumors she'd begun to hear. People spoke of her father as if he were a legend, an unseen force that had brought down an entire gang in days. She wanted to know what he had done for her, but even more, she wanted to understand why. With a heavy sigh, Marcus shared the truth, telling Emma about the life he had once led, the choices he'd made, and the fierce determination he'd felt to protect her. She listened quietly, her admiration for him deepening as she realized the lengths he'd gone to keep her safe. Emma, he said, holding her hand gently, I chose this life to give you peace. My past, it's behind me, and I don't want it to be a part of your future. What I did for you. Nothing will ever come before you. They sat together in silence, the strength of their bond reaffirmed. In that moment, Marcus knew he'd found something more powerful than any reputation, the unwavering love of his daughter. In the aftermath of his confrontation with Victor, Marcus's name resurfaced in whispers across the city. Those who remembered him as the formidable gang leader were both awed and wary, respecting the man who had once commanded such power and had, in mere days, dismantled a gang that had seemed untouchable. Though Marcus had stepped away from that life long ago, his return to defend his daughter became a story that quickly turned into legend, his reputation as fierce as it had ever been. Yet Marcus made a conscious choice to remain in the background, to let the rumors settle without adding fuel to them. He went back to his quiet life, focusing on his business and spending time with Emma. His actions had been a reminder of what he was capable of, but they also reinforced his desire to leave the past behind and focus on the future he had built for them. The remnants of Victor's gang faded away, their story becoming a warning to those who might think of crossing certain lines. Marcus's family was now understood to be untouchable, shielded by a silent but enduring legacy. In the city's underworld, Marcus became known as a man not to be disturbed, a man whose past, though dormant, was powerful enough to protect those he loved.